Although Gardevoir managed to get 6 representatives in the top 8 at NAIC, Lost Box was actually able to get the best of all of these elite Gardevoir players and take down the biggest tournament of the year. So in today's video, I'm going to be going over some Lost Box puzzles, talking about some cool checkmate situations, and a couple prize mapping puzzles with Drew Hedrick's champion list. So let's get right into the video and talk about the list. Now, when we look at Drew Hedrick's list, one of the first things you'll notice is that there is no Raikou V or Forest Sealstone, and instead it has been replaced by Iron Thorns EX, which has been one of the latest additions, along with that Blood Moon Ursaluna EX. Now, both of these cards have an incredible number of applications, especially the Iron Thorns comes up in surprising situations. Of course, there for the Lugia matchup in order to stop that Summoning Star V-Star, but also good against decks like Gardevoir and Charizard in order to shut off their powerful abilities. Now, additionally, Blood Moon Ursaluna has become a great endgame Pokemon for this deck in order to take out Pokemon like Iron Hands EX, Miraidon EX, Raging Bolt EX, stuff like that. Those kind of big basic EX Pokemon, Blood Moon Ursaluna, really good at taking them all out. And then, of course, this deck has all the classic Lost Box options. Cram Sableye Greninja, great at spreading damage and using one prize attacks. And of course, we got the Roxanne in there in order to have a little bit of a disruption at the end of the game. So that's going to be the list I'm working with in today's videos for all these puzzles. The link to the list will also be available in the description. So if you want to check it out and look at it for a bit longer, it'll be down there. But now that we've talked about the list, I'm going to get straight into our first puzzle today. Now, seeing as Gardevoir did take up 6 of the top 8 spots at NAIC, I figured it would only be appropriate to start off today with a Gardevoir puzzle. So in this situation, we know that our opponent has Klefki in their deck, and we're going to want to prepare ourselves as best as possible. Now, this puzzle is also going to be a bit of a series of sequencing, so I'm going to be giving you plenty of opportunities to pause the video and come up with our next action. Now, right now, I'm going to give you an opportunity to come up with a plan. What do you want to do this turn? What are your initial thoughts on the given hand? What Pokemon do you want on the board? All things we want to figure out before we start making any actions. All right, so some of the things we're going to want to do this turn, ideally we could get to 3 in the Lost Zone. That would allow us to use a Lost Vacuum and a Colress on our next turn in order to get to 7 and use Ampu very much. Now, another thing we can do to make that Ampu very much easier is get an Iron Hands on the board with an energy on it. So, of course, we're going to have to see how this turn plays out, but those are going to be our goals for the turn. Now, I think the first action we're going to want to do here is activate Pokestop, as this is going to give us a lot of information on what we still need for the turn. For example, if we hit a bunch of Nest Balls, we know we have our Pokemon, and then off of our flower selectings, we can feel free to put additional Pokemon into the Lost Zone, as we already have access to what we need. So let's spin this Pokestop. All right, so pretty good Pokestop. We got a Buddy Buddy Poppin. That's going to let us get some more Pokemon down at some point, but we did mill our Radiant Greninja, which kind of sucks. So I'm going to let you guys pause the video here and come up with our next action. All right, our next action is going to be this Buddy Buddy Poffin. Now that we have access to all of our Comfeys, we're going to want to take them out of our deck in order to avoid drawing into them. For example, if we were about to use flower selecting and we drew into one of these Comfeys, it would be a little annoying, as that's not really what we're looking for. So now that we've searched out these Comfeys, what's our next action? Again, continuing on this idea of wanting to remove Pokemon from our deck, I think it's a good idea here to use this Nest Ball to grab Iron Hands. That's going to be our ideal attacker. And if we flower selecting into Iron Hands and something else, we're going to be forced to take that Iron Hands, which could be a little annoying, as we already had a Nest Ball to search it out. So now that we've gotten all of our Pokemon in play, the only thing that's really left to do here is use flower selecting. So I'm not going to give you guys an opportunity to pause. I'm just going to go ahead and activate flower selecting. All right, pretty no-brainer flower selecting there. We're going to take the switch, and then we're going to activate another Comfey. Look at the top 2 cards of our deck. I'm just going to take this switch here, potentially allowing us to get more in our loss zone on our following turns. I don't think it is particularly important for the sake of this puzzle, but then we're just going to use Rescue Board, activate our third Comfy. We're going to want to take this energy card here. This could potentially allow us to manually attach like 4 times to our Iron Hands in order to attack. And then once we've activated all of our Comfies, got all of our Pokemon in play, we're going to attach to this Iron Hands. And this is what I would consider a pretty ideal turn 1 against this Klefki Gardevoir build. And another thing to think about in a situation like this is that in this specific situation, our hand is very strong. We have Prime Catcher, Switch, Energy, and so we are well on our way to breaking that Klefki lock and getting into that turn 2 Ampy very much. Now, as a Gardevoir player in this situation, it is very important, if possible, to play an Iono. Now, it might not seem like this Lost Box hand is very strong, right? It's only 6 cards, and if you Iono, it's just 6 new cards, so what's the difference, right? In this situation, I would actually think of this 6-card hand as a 13-card hand, because the Lost Box player drew 7 at the start, or actually more than 13. So you draw 7 at the start, draw for turn, that's 8, and 3 Comfies means that this Lost Box player has seen 14 cards on this turn. So that's 14 cards that could have been a Prime Catcher, a Colress, a Boss's Orders, or any other good cards. So an Iono from the Gardevoir side actually limits this theoretical 14 card hand down to 6, which, when I put it that way, sounds very good. So as a Lost Box player here, it's important to realize that, and realize that it is very likely this hand is going to the bottom of the deck. Whether you have a good hand or a bad hand, it's always something you want to be thinking about is a potential Iono from these Iono heady decks. Up next, we've got a prize mapping puzzle up against a Raging Bolt deck. Now, in this situation, we've fallen behind 2 prizes, which means that if we just go in with Ursaluna, we're going to be losing the prize trade. So we got to get a little bit creative with this one. The contents of the discard piles are not very important, except that our opponent is down an Iono and Palpad, so we won't be facing any disruption for the remainder of the game, and they're also down a switch card, which can sometimes be relevant when it comes to their damage. Now, something I'll mention is that all of our opponent's deck lists, when it's relevant, will be down in the description below, so you can check out Brandon Salazar's Raging Bolt list, which I've used for this puzzle. Now, other than that, I think that's all the information you guys need to go ahead and pause the video and come up with a prize map that will let you win before this Raging Bolt player. Now, the specific hand is not super relevant to the puzzle, it's more so the prize mapping that I'm looking for here. Alright, so because the Ursaluna is not going to get us there, we're going to be looking to use our 1 prize attackers in order to shift the prize trade in our favor. So what we can do here is we can go for a Radiant Greninja attack, put some damage on the Squawkabilly and one of the bench Ogerpons. These Pokemon just have the lowest HP, which is going to become relevant later on. Now, for our opponent, likely it's just going to knock one of our guys out. So let's say our Radiant Greninja dies. Now what we can do is we can come in on this next turn with a Sableye, and we can Sableye, knock out the Squawkabilly, and dump the remaining damage onto Ogerpon. Right, so it's going to be 70 on the Squawk, 50 on the Ogerpon, so this is going to go to 140, and this is going to die. We're going to take 2. Then at this point, our opponent's just going to knock us out again, because that's all their deck really does. They're going to go down to 2, and at this point, we can recover Sableye, and Sableye this Ogerpon again. Now, as you can see, we've significantly overkilled this Ogerpon. 260 damage means that even with 1 switch card, we still have enough damage to make this play. Now, this other switch card in the discard pile was relevant because with 2 switch cards, our opponent could actually heal this Ogerpon out of range. Now, if your opponent does something like this, something you can do in order to counteract it is use Radiant Greninja twice, as Radiant Greninja piles 180 damage onto the board, whereas Sableye only does 120. So consider switch card into your decision making when you're mapping out these Sableye Greninja lines, and be aware that if you can Greninja multiple times, it usually is a better option. But in this case, the Sableye will be enough. we're going to go down to 2 prize cards. And at this point, all our opponent can do is go down to 1, at which point we can clean up the game with Ursaluna. Now, one other thing to think about in this situation, which I still haven't mentioned, is Bravery Charm. Now, I'm not sure if Brandon's list actually played them. It looked like it didn't, but a lot of these Raging Bolt decks do have Bravery Charms, so it's important to hold on to your Lost Vacuums so that you can get rid of them, or account for that extra 50 HP in your Sableye Greninja math when you're trying to map out your prizes. Coming into our third puzzle today, we're up against one of the worst performing decks at NAIC. We got Dragapult on the other side here, and sometimes this deck can actually be very formidable for a Lost Box deck, as we don't play Roaring Moon EX anymore, and we have no way to one-shot this Dragapult EX. And now, there are a few things that are relevant to the context of this puzzle. So first of all, our Sableye is in the Lost Zone, so we don't have access to that. Additionally, these are the contents of our deck. You'll see a couple things to point out. We got one Mirage Gate, we got Palpad Boss Roxanne, got Super Rod, I think we got another Super Rod in hand, so no shortage of Super Rods there. Otherwise, you can take inventory of what's in your deck. And in this situation, we're looking for a way to not immediately lose the game. Of course, our opponent is threatening a variety of ways to take their last prize card on their next turn, and we're going to need to get a little bit creative and hope to get perhaps a little bit lucky here in order to win the game. But I believe that's all the information you'll need to go ahead and pause the video. I guess one other thing to say here is that you have access to all of your abilities still. This is a bit of a sequencing puzzle. There's a lot of actions to consider. So I'll bring up the contents of your deck again, and you can pause the video here and come up with your solution. Okay, so initially it might look like we have an opportunity to win the game here with a potential Iron Hands attack, but we do not have enough Mirage Gates. We are one short in order to make that play, so we cannot win the game this turn. Now, another thing that looks tempting here is perhaps bringing in this Barrel and using Sableye to attack the bench, but we also don't have access to that, so we're going to have to knock out the active Pokemon. I believe the best thing to go for in this situation is something like an Ursaluna attack comboed with Roxanne. Our opponent does not have a way to one-shot Ursaluna on their board. Another thing that's going to come with this is we're going to need to switch card and heal both of our Comfies, or else Phantom Dive is just going to snipe one of those off from the bench. So what you're going to want to do here, I think the sequencing here is very complicated and also very important, as we need a lot of cards in order to actually win this game, right? So we're going to need this turn, we're going to need Roxanne, Ursaluna. I think the best thing for us to do here is Prime Catcher in this barrel and knock it out to limit our opponent's draw. Hopefully they can't find a boss's orders. Another thing we're probably going to want to do this turn is Lost Vacuum away this Pokestop. And then on our next turn, we're going to need to switch our Ursaluna back to the bench, meaning we're going to need this switch to do that. And we're likely going to need another boss's orders. Iron Bundle is in the Lost Zone, so that's not going to be available to us to take our last knockout of the game. So we're also going to need this boss's orders. Lots of cards in our deck that we need. Lots of potential combinations of deadly Comfies, right? Like, for example, if we were to flower selecting into Roxanne and Ursaluna, it would completely ruin this plan. So it's important that we maximize our odds. We're going to start off by nest balling out this Ursaluna. Now we avoid that combination of Roxanne and Ursaluna, and we just have to avoid a couple other combinations. Now, another thing we can do here is start off with Greninja. This is going to let us draw 2, not having to put anything in the Lost Zone. So we'll give the deck a shuffle, draw 2. Now, we didn't manage to find any of the cards we need. Now, we're going to have to activate Flower Selecting. Once we Flower Selecting, we'll be guaranteed to find Roxanne off of Pokegear. And if we were to just rip Pokegear here and whiff the Roxanne, I think it would be fairly detrimental. So we're just going to go ahead and activate Comfy here and hopefully not find a detrimental combination. No, this combination is completely fine. We're just going to chuck this Chorus in the Lost Zone because we need to play a boss's orders on our next turn. Now that we've done that, we can Pokegear, grab the Roxanne out of our deck. We can Prime Catcher Oh, I almost forgot. We also need to heal all of our guys off. So we're going to switch cart this Comfy out of the active, remove that damage. Now at this point, if we look at the contents of our deck, I think it's okay to rip Pokestop. We've took the Roxanne out of our deck. So let's go ahead and Pokestop, hopefully finding Switch Cart. If we mill any of our other cards, it should be okay. So let's give the deck a shuffle, view top cards. Looks like we're going to find that Switch Cart. That's great. Boss is going to go to the discard, but it's okay. We have Palpad. I think we'll just go ahead and put that boss back now. Switch Cart, heal this Comfy, send up anything that's not the Ursaluna, heal off that damage, Prime Catcher in that Bib. Maybe we want to thin a couple cards here to maximize our odds on the next turn. I'm not going to focus on that too heavily. Lost zoning this Pokestop also seems like a good idea in order to reduce our opponent's odds of finding boss, right? They could find like Pokestop into Ultra Ball for Luminion boss, so limit our opponent's odds there. Roxanne, deck ourselves out. I'm sure I could have done this a little bit better. Perhaps I should have kept that Pal Pad, and then I could have drawn it off the Roxanne and had Boss's Orders as a top card of our deck, but I'm just going to use the Super Odd to make sure we don't deck out, and then knock out this barrel. Now, this is going to put our opponent in a pretty rough spot. They're going to have to hit pretty much Boss off of this. Also, an Iono could be potentially annoying, as our Blood Moon Ursaluna can't attack 2 turns in a row. But I think that's a pretty good walkthrough of what that turn might look like as a Lost Box player. You can see how I kind of came up with a plan at the beginning of the turn, and then tried to maximize my odds of nothing going wrong. And I think that is fairly representative of how this deck plays. And I'm probably not the greatest Lost Box player. Let me know in the comments down below if you thought I sequenced that one out poorly, if there was something I could have done better, as this one was a pretty long series. All right, in our 4th puzzle today, we're going to be up against Charizard, but this puzzle isn't really about Charizard. It's about creating a checkmate. So in this situation, we've already played a Colress, we've activated both of our Comfies, we can still use Greninja and Pokestop, and we're going to be looking to put together as high a win percentage on our next turn as possible. Could even be guaranteed. But a couple things to note about the board state. This is a look at our loss zone. Nothing particularly relevant in here. We got a gate, Iron Thorns is in there, and a bunch of irrelevant cards. Our opponent has played their ace spec, so we don't have to worry about like a prime catcher or a potential unfair stamp, as they've already used that. Otherwise, we have very limited information about our opponent's Charizard deck here. Could have a Jirachi, it could have multiple Turos, it could have multiple Ionos, it could have Roxanne. All these cards are possible and something you're going to want to think about when coming up with your solution. We're not considering anything crazy that like doesn't belong in a Charizard deck, but anything that could reasonably be in a Charizard deck is a part of the puzzle. This is a look at the remaining contents of our deck, and we're going to be looking to maximize our odds of winning on the following turn. So I'll let you guys pause the video here and see what you can come up with. Now, something that you may immediately notice in this puzzle is that we have access to Radiant Greninja and Pokestop, which will find us 5 cards, and there are 5 cards in our deck. So that's what I'm going to start off by doing. We're going to use Greninja, draw 2. These cards aren't particularly relevant, and then we're going to Pokestop, and I believe all the rest are items, so we're going to draw them. If we Pokestopped away the Cramorant, really doesn't make too much of a difference. Now from here, some of you may be thinking of going for some kind of double Sableye checkmate. For example, you could like Sableye the Bib this turn and then plan to Sableye the Manaphy next turn, but our opponent could play Jirachi, our opponent could Turo, and then potentially make another Charizard EX. There's a couple ways that this like double Sableye checkmate could go wrong, so I'm going to be going for a little bit of a different setup here. We're going to retreat our Comfy out into this Sableye, then that went to my hand. Then we're going to Super Rod, put back a couple of energies. I'm going to put back Psychic, Water, Lightning. Whoops, that's not how I do that. I'm going to put back all 3 of these energies. I'm going to use Mirage Gate to get them down. Put this one on the Sableye, put this one on the Comfey. Then after that, I'm going to use Lost Vacuum, get rid of some useless card. This Hands. Ideally, this Cramorant would have been Pokestopped away, but I think this is fine. We're going to get rid of that Defiance Band. We can just bench this Cramorant, actually. It doesn't really cost us anything. Buddy Buddy Poffin, just get nothing. Palpad, back Roxanne, and I realize I have actually made a mistake here. We needed this Ursaluna, so I'm actually going to get one less energy card, and I'm going to put back this Ursaluna. I also think it's a good idea, instead of putting this energy on the Comfey, just stash it in the deck so that our deck looks like this. Now we can Sableye and knock out the Bib, and I believe this covers every option our opponent has. The only thing that could potentially be scary here is a Roxanne, but I think we're pretty well covered from that as well. What we're, of course, angling for on our next turn is just an Ursaluna and a Prime Catcher knockout. I think it's important that we conserve this switch. For example, if our opponent set up some kind of a board where they like Turrowed this Manaphy, made this a Charizard, and like somehow attacked with this Radzard again. I'm not exactly sure how they would do this, but it seems like potentially concerning. Maybe they could play like a switch. That would be a little crazy, but I don't think a board like this is particularly unreasonable. Then at this point, if our only switch was Prime Catcher, it actually wouldn't work. So I think we want this switch card as well. Also a great card for us to draw off of Roxanne. That way we can just get off this Ursaluna attack on the next turn. Additionally, if our opponent decides not to have a knockout, we have access to another energy. So we could actually like put down this Ursaluna and attack with it. You know, maybe if our opponent did something like Turo up the Manaphy and pass, maybe make another Charizard, something like that, then we would be able to win on the next turn anyways. We could like just switch into the Ursaluna. Or maybe it wouldn't work, but I think this is pretty much the best you can get. Roxanne, of course, is a little concerning. I think you would be guaranteed to win anyways off Roxanne. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys came up with a better way to optimize your deck, a way to thin out more cards, or maybe even a different way to checkmate. I don't know, but feel free to let me know in the comments down below. All right, and our last puzzle today, we're going to be creating another checkmate situation. This time, we're playing the Lost Box Mirror Match, and we have gotten to 4 prizes first. Our opponent is playing the exact same 60 cards as us, and we have full information of that, so we can play accordingly. We have access to pretty much anything we want. I made the hand an embarrassment of riches so that we can set up basically whatever we want. So go ahead, pause the video here. I guess one more thing, nothing in the lost zones are particularly relevant. As you can see here, none of our resources from either player are really in the lost zone, so all options are available to both players. Our prizes as well, pretty calm. So pause the video here and come up with the strongest board state you can create, potentially even guaranteeing the win on your next turn. All right, so step 1 here is going to be to establish an Iron Hands, something like a Nest Ball, get down this Hands. We can use Greninja to put these energies in the discard, maybe something like this. Then we can Rod, put them all into the deck, and we can start gating. So we're going to gate twice, get 4 energies onto this Iron Hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. And something that you might be thinking in this situation is that you could go Iron Hands with a Sableye on the bench, and the Sableye could clean up these Comfeys on the next turn, but Switch Cart could ruin all your plans, healing off that Comfey. So what we're actually going to look to do is set up this Greninja, so we can go gate, set up this Greninja. Now, I'm sure I could have done these energies better. I'm not exactly sure, but let's imagine that I can gate properly. Here we go. We got all of our energies in play. We can retreat this Comfey, and we can amp this Cramorant. Now, the one thing that we do have to worry about here, and is a pretty hard play to find, I think, but our opponent could go Ursaluna EX, bring in our Radiant Greninja, Roxanne, and knock it out, and we wouldn't actually have guaranteed game. So another thing we can do here is Nest Ball for the Iron Bundle. That way, if they only bench 1 EX, we can bundle it to the bench. But our opponent could always just bench two EXs here. So for example, they could do something, maybe something even better. They could go like hands. Oops. Let's just fix this. They could go like hands, bring in the Greninja, knock out the hands, or knock out the Greninja with hands, and then they're of course positioning themselves to win the game on the next turn. But I don't think we can do any better than this. Because, for example, if we were to bench this Ursaluna in advance, our opponent could always like stall it out. We don't have enough energies to power it up as well. So if you were to set up your board something like this, then our opponent could bring in the Ursaluna, Roxanne us, and then start attacking our bench. They could do something like Greninja both our Comfies, and then they're positioned to clean up our Iron Hands with Blood Moon on the following turn. So I think the best board state we can create looks something like this. Then, of course, like thinning our deck as well as possible, keeping as many outs to Blood Moon in our deck. So if our opponent does amp our Radiant Greninja, then we have that available to us. But I believe that's the best solution, the best semi-checkmate you can come up with in a position like this. Hands Greninja, Ursaluna in the deck. Let me know in the comments down below if you have a more elegant solution for this puzzle that could potentially guarantee you the game, even if it takes a ridiculous amount of resources. Let me know. I'd be curious to see. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. And other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one.